Commander James Rivera's descent pod sliced through the emerald skies of Sigma 7. Below stretched oceans like glass and forests of light. His heart pounded, humanity's first contact with intelligent life. The pod landed softly. After confirming the air was safe, he stepped out into warm, fragrant air and grass that shimmered purple to gold. In the distance, crystalline towers gleamed. A city, advanced beyond doubt. "Greetings," he called, translator humming. "Commander James Rivera of Earth, I come in peace." A rustle stopped him. 4 figures emerged, tall, graceful, unmistakably female. Their silver skin caught the sunlight like living metal. The leader, copper-haired with glowing green eyes, smiled. "Well, well," a little pink creature from that backwater Earth. Her voice rippled like distorted music. "I'm here to establish peaceful relations," James said steadily. "How adorable," she mocked. The others laughed. One with shifting rainbow hair whispered, "Can we keep him?" "He's almost cute," James kept his composure. "Earth seeks knowledge exchange." The leader circled him like a predator. "Tell me, do all your kind have such curious protrusions?" She gestured at his nose. More laughter. Another alien sneered, "Imagine needing to smell things all the time." He took a slow breath. "Ladies, I understand your surprise. But humans are peaceful. We wish to learn." Her smile faded to curiosity. "You're persistent, human. Very well, show us what your world has." James activated his holographic projector. A glowing Earth spun before them, a blue marble of life. "This is home," he said, "a world of oceans, cities, and dreams we hope to share." "Boring," the 4th alien muttered, her glowing braids pulsing with light. "Can't we just keep him as a novelty?" The leader, copper-haired and sharp-eyed, raised a hand. "Wait, Lyria. Look at the atmospheric data." "Fascinating." James brightened. "Yes, Earth's nitrogen-oxygen balance allows unique combustion reactions." Her tone shifted, genuine curiosity replacing mockery. "Interesting." Continue. James brought up holograms, quantum computing, renewable energy, physics. She listened, intrigued. The others groaned. "Vera?" the iridescent-haired one whined. "Do we have to listen to this monkey talk about dirt?" Lyria smirked. "I thought we were going to play with him." "I'm not a sideshow," James said firmly. "I came as an equal, to build understanding." "Equal?" Lyria scoffed. "You're barely above reptiles." "Enough," the leader snapped. Her gaze softened. "You've piqued my interest, James. I'm Kira. These are Vera, Senna, and Lyria." James nodded. "I'd be glad to answer your questions." Kira smiled, dangerous and inviting. "Then perhaps a private tour of our city. We could learn firsthand." He hesitated. "Wouldn't your team join us?" "They have tasks to attend," Kira said smoothly. Vera smirked. "We wouldn't interrupt your research." James ignored the teasing tone. "Very well. Lead the way." As they walked toward the gleaming towers, excitement warred with unease. Kira's sidelong glances hinted at motives far beyond diplomacy, and James realized he might have just stepped into something far more perilous than first contact. The crystalline spires of Sigma 7's capital shimmered like living jewels, light refracting across curved organic structures that seemed to grow from the land itself. "Impressive, isn't it?" Kira said, her tone laced with pride. "It's beautiful," James replied evenly, "though Earth has its own wonders." Different, but no less advanced, Kira smiled faintly. "Then allow me to show you true mastery." She waved her hand, and a wall rippled open. Inside, floating platforms and glowing bridges filled a vast atrium teeming with radiant beings. "This is the heart of our civilization," Kira said. "Every discovery, every art, every truth preserved here." James's awe overrode caution. "The data capacity must be beyond measure. How do you manage it?" Kira placed her hand on a glowing pedestal. Holograms exploded into view. Mathematics, formulas, streams of living light. We've mapped the quantum foam itself, she said. Reality at the smallest scale. James's breath caught. You manipulate matter at the Planck level? Incredible. On Earth, we're only beginning to grasp quantum theory. Her expression softened. You actually understand this? He explained humanity's advances in physics and computing, speaking with fervor. For the first time, Kira's eyes held not mockery, but respect. You surprise me, James, she said. Perhaps there's more to your kind than I thought. We could achieve much together, he said earnestly. Our knowledge and yours, combined. Perhaps, she murmured, stepping closer, but knowledge isn't the only thing worth exploring. Her scent, ozone, and alien flowers filled his senses. Tell me, she whispered, fingers brushing his arm, are all humans this curious? James hesitated. Curiosity defines us, yes, but I think this is crossing professional lines. Kira laughed softly. Oh, James. I'm only experimenting. Isn't that what discovery means? Before he could reply, she closed the distance, her touch electric. For science, she breathed. He faltered and gave in. When dawn's light refracted through the crystal towers, James lay beside her, torn between wonder and dread. Kira smiled lazily. You've proven a fascinating subject, James of Earth. I expect many more experiments. The days that followed passed in a blur for James. He found himself caught in a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and clandestine encounters with Kira. He toured the technological marvels of Sigma-7 cities, attended scientific lectures that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics, and participated in cultural ceremonies that left him breathless. Despite his initial reservations, he couldn't deny the growing connection between him and Kira. She remained intellectually stimulating and physically captivating, though her occasional barbs about humanity reminded him that their relationship existed in a strange gray area between genuine affection and exotic fascination. It wasn't until nearly 2 weeks into his stay on Sigma-7 that James began to notice something odd. Kira's friends, Vera, Senna, and Lyria, had started treating him differently. Gone were the mocking jabs and dismissive looks. Instead, they regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and something that almost looked like respect. Like one evening, as James sat with the 4 alien women in a luxurious lounge overlooking the glittering city, Vera leaned in close, her iridescent hair seeming to shimmer with excitement. So, James, she said, her voice low and sultry, Kira's been keeping you all to herself, hasn't she? Don't you think it's time you shared some of that earth charm with the rest of us? James nearly choked on his drink. What? Lyria giggled, her copper hair seeming to bristle with excitement. Oh, come on. We've all heard about your cultural exchanges with Kira. It's only fair that we get to experience it too. For science, of course. Senna nodded in agreement, her elaborate braid swaying. After all, a proper study requires multiple data points, doesn't it? We can't base conclusions on a single subject. James's mind reeled. He looked to Kira for help, but found only amusement in her emerald eyes. She was enjoying his discomfort. Don't look so shocked, James, Kira purred. I told you that we Sigmatans have a very open approach to scientific inquiry. Besides, I'm curious to see how you handle multiple subjects. What followed was a week of passionate encounters that pushed the boundaries of both James's stamina and his understanding of interspecies relationships. Each of the alien women brought her own unique approach to their experiments, each one leaving James simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. Vera was playful and creative, delighting in discovering new ways to pleasure him. Senna was intense and demanding, taking what she wanted with an assertiveness that both thrilled and intimidated him. Lyria was passionate and uninhibited, seemingly insatiable in her curiosity about human sexuality. And through it all, Kira watched, sometimes joining in, sometimes simply observing with that enigmatic smile that James still couldn't quite read. As the days passed, however, a growing sense of unease began to gnaw at James. This wasn't what he had come to Sigma 7 for. He was supposed to be establishing diplomatic relations between two civilizations, not engaging in interstellar liaisons with four alien women. The guilt plagued him, even as he found himself unable to resist their charms. It was as if he was caught in a current too strong to resist, swept along whether he wished to be or not. It all came to a head nearly a month into his stay. James was in the midst of a formal meeting with Sigmaton government officials, presenting a proposal for resource exchange and scientific collaboration, when Kira burst through the chamber doors. Her usual composure was shattered, her blue skin several shades paler than normal. "Marcus," she gasped, then corrected herself. "James, I need to speak with you, now." The officials exchanged confused glances as James excused himself. He followed Kira to a private chamber where Vera, Senna, and Lyria were already waiting. All four women looked shaken, their expressions a mixture of fear and something else, something that looked almost like wonder. "What's going on?" James asked, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. "Is something wrong?" Kira took a deep breath, her emerald eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "James, there's no easy way to say this. We've just received the results of our medical scans, and we're pregnant. All of us." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. James staggered backward, gripping a nearby table for support. That's that's impossible. We're different species. The biological incompatibility alone would make reproduction impossible. How could... "That's what we thought too," Vera said softly, her usual playfulness replaced by somber seriousness. "But the evidence is undeniable. Our scientists are baffled. It shouldn't be possible. And yet..." Senna added, her hand resting protectively over her abdomen, "We're carrying hybrid offspring, the first of their kind in the known universe, as far as we can tell." Lyria, for once, said nothing. Her usual vibrant energy seemed muted, replaced by a quiet contemplation. James's mind raced, trying to process the implications of this revelation. His actions hadn't just affected him, or even just these four women. They had the potential to change the course of two entire civilizations. The ramifications were staggering. What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vera let out a nervous laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Well, I guess that depends on you, doesn't it? Are you ready to be a father? 4 times over?" The news of the unprecedented pregnancy spread through Sigma 7 like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of controversy that threatened to consume everything James had worked for. Within hours, he found himself summoned before the Sigmaton High Council, a body of 12 alien dignitaries whose expressions ranged from shock to barely concealed outrage. James stood in the center of a vast, circular chamber, the four pregnant women behind him. The council members sat elevated on floating platforms, their gazes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Human," The chief counselor's voice boomed through the chamber, his translator struggling to convey the depth of his emotion. Do you comprehend the gravity of what you have done? The magnitude of your transgression against our society? James swallowed hard, acutely aware of the hostile attention directed at him. Counselor, I assure you, this was not my intention. We had no idea our species were biologically compatible. This was as much a surprise to us as it is to you. Kira stepped forward, her blue skin seeming to glow under the chamber's lights. Honored Council, I take full responsibility for initiating this exploration. The human cannot be held solely accountable. This was a mutual decision undertaken in the spirit of scientific inquiry. A murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. James shot Kira a grateful look, surprised by her sudden defense and the vulnerability in her voice. The chief counselor's eyes narrowed, his alien features hardening. Regardless of intention, the fact remains that we now face an unprecedented situation. These hybrid offspring represent an unknown variable, a potential threat to the very fabric of our society. Or, he paused, his tone shifting slightly, they could represent something far greater. Another counselor, her voice tinged with excitement and barely contained wonder, leaned forward. Think of the potential. A fusion of human and sigma-10 genetics could represent the next evolutionary step for both our species. The capabilities we might unlock, the understanding we might gain. The chamber erupted into heated debate. Counselors shouted over one another, their voices creating a cacophony of competing arguments. Phrases like genetic contamination and evolutionary leap were thrown around with increasing fervor. Suddenly, a commotion at the back of the chamber caught everyone's attention. A group of sigmatans in elaborate, ornate robes pushed their way forward, their movements synchronized and purposeful. They were led by a tall figure with undulating head tentacles that seemed to writhe with barely contained fury. "Heretics!" the leader shouted, pointing an accusing finger directly at James and the four women. "This is an abomination. This goes against all our sacred teachings. The prophecies speak of such contamination. It will bring nothing but ruin to our world." Another faction surged forward, these dressed in sharp, utilitarian attire that James assumed indicated scientists or academics. Their spokesperson, a smaller sigmatan with intricate facial markings, countered sharply, "Nonsense. This is an unprecedented opportunity for genetic advancement and interspecies understanding. We cannot let superstition and fear stand in the way of progress and evolution." The chamber descended into chaos. James felt his heart rate accelerate as the debate grew more heated, more personal. He could see violence brewing just beneath the surface of this civilized governmental proceeding. Then, just as the tension reached a breaking point, the chief counselor's voice cut through the din with absolute authority. "Silence!" he roared, the force of his command reverberating through the chamber with physical weight. Everyone froze instantly. The chief counselor stood, his imposing figure commanding the room's full attention. This situation requires careful consideration and deliberation. We cannot allow fear or prejudice to dictate our response until we can determine the full implications of these pregnancies, both for our society and for the offspring themselves. The human and the affected females will be placed under protective custody. James's heart sank. Protective custody. That was just a euphemism for imprisonment. "You mean imprisonment?" he said quietly, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. The chief counselor's expression softened slightly. "Think of it as a precautionary measure, for your own safety as well as ours. We need time to understand what is happening, to study the pregnancies, to prepare for what may come." As guards, imposing armored figures with multiple limbs, moved forward to escort them away, James caught Kira's eye. The look they shared spoke volumes. Whatever came next, they were in this together. And whatever happened to them, their children would be products of not just biology, but of love and choice. The days that followed were a blur of medical examinations, interrogations, and tense confinement. James paced the small apartment that served as their gilded cage, his mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The walls, while beautiful, felt like a prison. Kira watched him from her perch on a sculptured chair, her hand absently rubbing her still flat abdomen. She'd taken to spending most of her time observing him, a small smile playing at her lips despite their dire circumstances. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor if you keep that up," she quipped, a shadow of her old humor creeping back into her voice. James paused, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "How can you be so calm?" "We're prisoners, Kira. We're locked in this place while half the planet wants us dead and the other half wants to dissect us. Our children are safe," Kira interrupted firmly, growing, thriving, according to the medical scans. And as for calm, she rose gracefully and moved to stand before him. "I'm not calm, James. I'm terrified, but panic won't help anyone. We have to think clearly, strategically." James felt a smile tugging at his lips despite everything. That was one of the things he'd come to appreciate about Kira, her ability to find clarity in chaos. "You're right. I'm sorry. I know," she said simply. She reached up and touched his face, her cool blue fingers gentle against his skin. "We'll get through this. Together." As if on cue, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Vera, Senna, and Lyria entered quickly, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "We've got news," Vera announced, her iridescent hair seeming to shimmer with barely contained energy. "And it's not all bad." They huddled together in the center of the room, speaking in low voices. Vera explained that members of the scientific community had formed an alliance, demanding access to study their pregnancies more thoroughly. More importantly, they were publicly supporting the hybrid pregnancies, arguing that fear and prejudice were no match for the potential benefits of interspecies cooperation. "But there's more," Senna added, her hand protective over her swollen belly. "The religious factions are growing more vocal and more aggressive. There have been incidents, protests. Some of them are calling for our execution." Lyria, her usual brightness dimmed, simply nodded. "We're becoming a symbol, a battleground between those who fear the future and those who want to embrace it." James sank onto a nearby couch, his head in his hands. "This is spiraling out of control. I came here to prevent conflict, and instead, I've triggered a civil war." "No," Kira said firmly, sitting beside him. She lifted his chin so he had to meet her emerald gaze. "You came here to bridge worlds." "That's exactly what you're doing. The conflict was always there, James. It was always simmering beneath the surface. Our fear of the unknown, our tendency to categorize and reject what doesn't fit into our predetermined boxes. Your presence, our children, they're just forcing us to confront those fears. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, a necessary thing." James wanted to believe her, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. Over the following weeks, their confinement became increasingly restrictive. Medical teams from various factions conducted their examinations with varying degrees of invasiveness. Some were respectful and scientific, clearly motivated by genuine curiosity about the unprecedented pregnancies. Others were hostile, their questions laden with barely concealed prejudice. During one particularly tense examination, James stood outside the medical chamber, watching through a transparent panel as doctors examined Kira. Her hand moved to the sensor array monitoring her child's development, and he could see the mixture of wonder and protective fierceness in her expression. Despite everything, despite the chaos and danger, she was embracing motherhood. That night, as they lay together in their shared quarters, Kira rolled against him, her pregnant body fitting perfectly into his embrace. "Feel this," she whispered, guiding his hand to her swollen belly. A series of rapid movements pulsed beneath his palm, their child, moving, growing, preparing for life in a universe that didn't yet know how to accept it. "Is that," James began, wonder filling his voice. Kira nodded, a rare, genuine smile lighting up her face. "Our daughter. She seems to have inherited your restless nature. She's been active all day." James laughed, a sound that felt foreign after weeks of stress and fear. "Let's hope she's inherited your brains and beauty to balance it out." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sounds of Vera, Senna, and Lyria sleeping nearby in their shared quarters. In moments like these, James could almost forget the precariousness of their situation, the danger that lurked just beyond their walls. But reality, as always, had a way of intruding violently. The next morning, Vera burst into their common area, her usual cool demeanor shattered. Fear was evident in every line of her body, in the urgent pitch of her voice. "They're coming for us," she announced, her voice shaking slightly. "The purifiers. They've broken away from the main religious groups entirely, and they're calling themselves the cleansers now. They've issued an ultimatum. The government has until sunset to deliver us to them for execution. They're calling it a purification of the bloodline." Panic rippled through the room like an electric current. Lyria clutched her swollen belly protectively, while Senna began pacing frantically, her elaborate braid swaying in distressed arcs. Kira, however, stood perfectly still, her emerald eyes calculating. "How much time?" she asked calmly. "Not much," Vera replied grimly. "Maybe 6 hours before they start moving toward the city. Our inside sources say they're mobilizing now. Soldiers, vehicles, weapons. The official security forces are scrambling to respond, but there's a lot of internal conflict. Not everyone in the government is on our side." James felt his protective instincts flare into overdrive. These women, these four magnificent beings who had opened his mind and captured his heart, were in mortal danger. And their unborn children, his children, faced annihilation before they even had a chance to draw breath. "We need to get out of here," he said firmly, already moving toward the windows. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere defensible." Kira nodded, already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall that James hadn't even known existed. "I was hoping we wouldn't need this, but I had Senna's friend hide some supplies here. Backup power cells, nutrient packs, medical supplies, just in case." "Just in case?" Lyria looked at her with wide eyes. "I've learned from James that it's always good to have an escape plan," Kira replied with a slight smile. "After all, it's what humans do best. Survive." "Where can we go?" Senna asked, her hand trembling as she packed supplies. "This is their world. They know every city, every settlement, every hiding place." "Not everywhere," a new voice said from the doorway. They all turned to see Vera standing there, but now with a new figure beside her. A Sigmatin. James didn't recognize, with intricate geometric markings across his skin. "This is Karn." Vera explained quickly. He's part of an underground resistance movement, the ones who've been trying to help us. He knows places the government doesn't even know about. Old research facilities, abandoned settlements, natural caves. They're hidden, defensible, and remote. Karn nodded, his expression serious. We need to move now. My contacts say the cleansers are less than 3 hours away. I have a vehicle hidden nearby. Fast, equipped with stealth shielding. We can get you to the mountain facility where you'll have time to figure out your next move. What followed was a daring escape that would have made any action hero proud. Vera's escape route turned out to involve a combination of hacked security systems, improvised smoke bombs they constructed from common materials, and a stolen hover vehicle that none of them really knew how to pilot properly. As they sped away from the city, alarms blaring in the distance like the death knell of everything James had tried to build, he found himself laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all. Here he was, a diplomat turned fugitive, fleeing across an alien landscape with 4 pregnant women who, just months ago, had looked at him like he was some sort of inferior species. "What's so funny?" Kira shouted over the wind, her copper hair whipping wildly around her face as she gripped the vehicle's controls with fierce determination. James grinned, adrenaline singing through his veins. Just thinking about how I'm going to explain all this in my mission report. Day 1, made diplomatic contact. Day 30, impregnated 4 alien women and became a fugitive. I don't think the government expected this particular outcome. Kira's laughter joined his, a sound of defiance and life in the face of danger. But their mirth was short-lived. A series of sleek, ominous-looking craft appeared on the horizon behind them, gaining rapidly with terrifying speed. Their pursuers had found them. "The cleansers," Vera breathed, her face going pale. "They're faster than we thought." "The purifiers," Senna corrected, her voice tight with fear. "They've upgraded their fleet. Those are military-grade vessels." James gripped the makeshift weapon he'd assembled from spare parts. A desperate, probably useless measure, but it made him feel less helpless. "How long until they catch us?" 10 minutes, maybe less," Karn called from the pilot's seat, his hands moving frantically over the controls. "They've got better engines." "Our only advantage is maneuverability." "There," Lyria shouted, pointing ahead. "The canyon! We can lose them in there." Kira looked back at James, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second. In that moment, she saw the same determination he felt mirrored in her expression. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. "Hold on!" Kira shouted to the others, then turned the stolen hover vehicle sharply toward the narrow canyon, cutting through the rocky landscape ahead. The vehicle plunged into the treacherous passage just as laser fire from the pursuing crafts began sizzling past them, leaving trails of scorched air in their wake. The canyon walls were jagged and close, offering shelter but also danger. One miscalculation, and they'd crash into the rock face at high speed. "They're still coming," Vera called out, watching the pursuers through the rear viewport, "but they're having trouble keeping up with our smaller profile." James felt a surge of protective instinct unlike anything he'd experienced before. These women, Kira, Vera, Senna, and Lyria, and the unborn children they carried, were his responsibility now, his family. He gripped his makeshift weapon tighter, knowing it was inadequate but refusing to be helpless. The canyon twisted and turned, their vehicle banking sharply at each curve. Behind them, the larger purifier craft struggled with the tight passages, unable to navigate as quickly. But they were still there, still pursuing, still determined. "James," Kira called from the pilot's seat, "can you rig up something to cause a rock slide? Buy us some time?" James didn't hesitate. He worked quickly, gathering spare parts and power cells, fashioning them into an improvised explosive device. It was crude, dangerous to himself and the others, but it was all they had. "Get ready," he called out. He timed his throw perfectly, hurling the device at the canyon wall just as they passed beneath an overhang. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was enough. Tons of rock cascaded down behind them, blocking the canyon passage and forcing the lead purifier craft to swerve violently to avoid the debris. The second and third vessels behind it had less time to react. A burst of laser fire erupted from the pursuing craft, desperation making them reckless. One shot came close enough that James felt the heat of it singe his shoulder. "They're getting angry!" Lyria yelled, but there was something almost like excitement in her voice. "Keep going, Kira." "We're almost—" The canyon opened suddenly, releasing them into a vast mountain landscape. Snow-capped peaks rose on either side, and in the distance, James could see the shadowy outline of a structure carved into the mountainside. "The facility!" Karn shouted triumphantly. "We made it!" But the celebration was premature. The purifier craft emerged from the canyon, spreading out in a tactical formation. They weren't giving up. Kira pushed the stolen vehicle to its limits, racing across the barren landscape toward the facility. Behind them, the pursuers gained ground slowly but steadily. "They're going to cut us off!" Senna cried out, her hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly. James made a split-second decision. "Kira, get to the facility. Karn, help the women inside." "What are you doing?" Kira demanded, but she was already guiding the vehicle toward the structure. "Buying time," James replied grimly. He climbed to the roof of the vehicle, his makeshift weapon in hand. He fired it repeatedly at the approaching craft, not expecting to hit anything, just trying to disrupt their trajectory, force them to maneuver. One of the purifier pilots, either out of frustration or genuine threat assessment, changed course and headed directly for James. But his sacrifice wasn't necessary. As the craft swooped down, a burst of energy lanced out from the facility itself, some dormant defense system finally awakening. The pursuing craft jerked back, having to take evasive action. That split second of distraction was all Kira needed. She threw the hover vehicle into a wild maneuver that brought them crashing through an entrance to the facility. They tumbled inside, the vehicle skidding across the floor in a shower of sparks before grinding to a halt. For a moment, there was only the sound of their heavy breathing and the distant whine of the purifier craft attempting to approach the facility's shields. "Everyone okay?" James called out, already moving to help Kira from the pilot's seat. One by one, they confirmed they were unharmed, physically at least. Emotionally, they were all shaken by how close they'd come to capture or death. Vera moved quickly to the facility systems, her fingers flying over ancient controls. "This place, it's old. Really old, but the power systems are still active. I can reinforce the shielding, set up a communications array. If we can broadcast our story, get the truth out." "Do it," Kira said firmly, her eyes meeting James's. "They want to erase us. We won't let them. We'll show the entire planet what's really happening." Outside, the purifier craft circled, unable to penetrate the facility's defenses. Inside, James and Kira worked alongside Vera and Senna to prepare the communication array. Lyria, her pregnancy making movement difficult, provided crucial technical guidance. Her knowledge of Sigmaton systems proving invaluable despite her physical limitations. As the array hummed to life, James felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was it, their last chance. If this didn't work, they'd be trapped here, cut off from the rest of the world. "Ready?" Vera asked, looking at James. He looked at Kira. She nodded, her emerald eyes steady despite the fear he could see beneath her calm exterior. James stepped up to the transmission interface and began to speak. People of Sigma 7, people of Earth, my name is James Rivera, and I'm speaking to you from what may be our last refuge. I come to you not as a diplomat, not as a human, but as a father-to-be. The father of 4 children who represent something extraordinary, not a threat, but a bridge between our worlds. His words flowed with a passion and eloquence that surprised even him. He spoke of the fear and prejudice that had driven them into the mountains, of the desperate flight across a world that suddenly felt hostile. But more than that, he spoke of the love that had brought them together, of the hope embodied in 4 impossible pregnancies. These children, he continued, gesturing to the women beside him, are not abominations. They are not contamination. They are proof that the universe is vast enough for all of us, that our differences, our species, our cultures, our ways of seeing the world are not barriers, but bridges waiting to be crossed. As he spoke, something remarkable happened. The facility's long dormant systems came fully to life, broadcasting not just his voice, but holographic images, recorded footage of their journey. The tender moments between him and the women, the excitement when they discovered the pregnancies, the fear and desperation of their escape, the love and protective instinct that had driven James to risk everything for his newfound family. The people of Sigma 7 watched in real time as their story unfolded across communications networks. And slowly, something shifted in the collective consciousness of 2 worlds. Messages began pouring in before James had even finished speaking. Support from scientists who saw the potential, understanding from individuals who had experienced prejudice themselves, and most importantly, outrage from ordinary people at the idea that these children, these symbols of hope, were being hunted like criminals. The momentum grew. What had been a fringe movement of enlightened individuals became a groundswell of public opinion. The government, faced with overwhelming pressure from multiple factions of society, made the decision to call off the pursuit. By dawn, the Purifier craft had withdrawn. By midday, official representatives arrived, not as pursuers, but as mediators. Within 48 hours, the Sigmaton government had granted James and the 4 women protected status. Scientists and medical professionals from both Sigma 7 and Earth began arriving at the facility. What had been a refuge became a center of unprecedented research and cooperation. The hybrid pregnancies became the focus of intense study, not invasive or hostile, but genuinely curious and supportive. As the women's due dates approached, James found himself at the center of a media frenzy unlike anything either world had ever seen. News networks dedicated round-the-clock coverage. Philosophers debated the implications. Religious leaders reconsidered their theological frameworks. The births became one of the most anticipated events in interplanetary history. But through it all, James's focus remained where it should be, on Kira, Vera, Senna, and Lyria, and the miraculous lives growing within them. One particularly tense evening, as Kira paced their medical quarters, her swollen belly seeming to defy the laws of physics, James approached her with a tentative smile. "A credit for your thoughts?" he asked, using the Sigmatan phrase he'd picked up over the months. Kira paused, her emerald eyes meeting his. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. When we first met, I thought you were nothing more than a primitive curiosity. And now..." She gestured to her belly, to the medical monitors surrounding them, to the future they were about to bring into existence together. James chuckled. wrapping his arms around her as best he could, with her protruding stomach between them. And now you're carrying my alien love child. Funny how life works out. Hilarious, Kira replied dryly, but there was warmth in her voice. Though I still maintain that Sigmatan biology is inherently superior. Our children will simply benefit from your more rustic human traits. Oh, really? James raised an eyebrow, a mischievous glint in his eye. Want to test that theory? Their playful banter was interrupted by a sharp gasp from Kira. Her eyes widened as she looked down at the puddle forming at her feet. James, she breathed, a mixture of excitement and fear in her voice. I think it's time. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Medical teams rushed to prepare for the first ever birth of a human Sigmaton hybrid. James found himself shuttling between Kira's side and checking on the other women, all of whom had gone into labor within hours of each other. Apparently, this was a phenomenon that occurred when pregnant Sigmatans were in close proximity. The facility erupted into controlled chaos. Vera's labor was intense and relatively quick, her hybrid daughter entering the world with a cry that seemed to contain both human and alien frequencies. Senna gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, in a dramatic delivery that had everyone holding their breath. Lyria's labor lasted longer, more complicated, but she pushed through with the determination that had become her trademark. Her son came into the world with a shock of copper-colored hair and eyes that shifted between blue and brown. And finally, Kira's daughter arrived, a perfect blend of her parents, with blue-tinted skin and eyes that were unmistakably human, warm and full of possibility. As James held his daughter for the first time, watching her tiny hand curl around his finger, he felt a surge of emotion that transcended language or species. He looked down at the miracle they had created. This new life, this new beginning. She's perfect, Kira whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. James could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. The news of the successful births spread across both worlds like wildfire. What had once been seen as a potential threat was now hailed as a new dawn for both species. The children became symbols of hope, proof that different peoples could not just coexist, but create something beautiful together. Months later, the day of the official presentation ceremony arrived. James stood on a stage before a sea of faces, blue-skinned Sigmatans and a delegation of humans from Earth. Kira, Vera, Senna, and Lyria stood beside him, each cradling their precious bundles. As James stepped up to the podium, he felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. But as he looked out at the expectant faces, he felt something else too: hope. Genuine, powerful hope for the future. Friends, he began, his voice carrying through the chamber and broadcasting to billions across two worlds. Colleagues, fellow beings of this vast universe. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era. These children represent not just the union of two species, but the infinite potential that lies in embracing our differences. He spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, the fear, the prejudice, the desperate flight across an alien landscape. But he also spoke of the love and understanding that had ultimately prevailed. Let these little ones be a reminder to us all, he concluded, that the universe is vast and full of wonders, and that our greatest strength lies not in our similarities, but in our diversity, in our willingness to reach across the void between worlds and embrace the unknown. The applause was thunderous, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Kira moved forward, their daughter cradled in her arms. "People of Sigma 7, people of Earth," she said, her voice carrying the authority she'd always possessed, but now tempered with a new warmth. "We offer you our children as a bridge between our worlds. May they grow to be the ambassadors of a future where the stars themselves are no longer barriers, but roads to new understanding." One by one, each woman presented her child, speaking of her hopes for the future. The ceremony concluded with a symbolic gesture, a mixing of earth soil and sigmaton crystal, representing the joining of their two worlds. Later that night, as the official proceedings ended and the crowds dispersed, James found a quiet moment with Kira on a balcony overlooking the city. They stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of crimson and gold, their daughter sleeping peacefully in Kira's arms. "So," Kira said, a hint of her old humor creeping into her voice, "was this the result you expected when you decided to conduct your first contact mission?" James laughed softly. "Not even close. When I left Earth, I expected formal protocols, careful negotiations, maybe a trade agreement or two. I definitely didn't expect to fall in love with an alien woman and father 4 hybrid children." "Reckless," Kira observed, but there was affection in her voice. "Very human." "Is that a compliment?" James asked, wrapping an arm around her. "Perhaps," she replied enigmatically. "Or perhaps I'm simply acknowledging that your species has a certain charm in your unpredictability." James pulled her close, marveling at how natural it felt now. "And where do we go from here? Back to Earth? Stay on Sigma 7? Build a new colony on some neutral world?" Kira's gaze turned to the star-filled sky above them, a vista of 2 suns and 3 moons that still took James's breath away. "Why choose?" she asked, a familiar glint of adventure in her eyes. "We have a whole universe to explore, and a new generation to show it to." As they stood there, bathed in the light of alien stars, James felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. His mission of first contact had evolved into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. He looked down at his daughter, her tiny hand curled around his finger. In her face, he saw the future, not just for himself or for Kira, but for 2 entire worlds. A future of unity, of exploration, of endless possibility. "You're right," he said softly, pressing a kiss to Kira's temple. "The universe is waiting, and we've got one hell of a story to tell." Their daughter stirred slightly in her sleep, as if agreeing with them. Above, the stars twinkled with promise, beckoning them toward a future where the boundaries between worlds and species were just the beginning of a grand adventure.